Welcome back to the alcohol-free revolution. We've been doing this for a few weeks now, and we're starting to build a bit of a following.
Yes.
If you want to help us continue to grow that following, if you could leave us a 5-star review, it would really help. You probably hear this on podcasts all the time. Leave a review, subscribe, all that kind of thing. Well, it generally does help with the podcast platform algorithm. So if you are alcohol free and you're listening to us because you know what we're talking about and you're part of that movement, part of that community, get on board, support us, give us 5 stars. It would mean a hell of a lot. If you're here because you're sober curious, welcome. We really hope that we can give you some motivation, because that's really what our mission is with the alcohol-free revolution. We want to bring people together and celebrate how great life can be when alcohol's not in the picture. You know, my co-host, Steve Smith. Steve, how's your week been and what have you been doing?
Yeah, I've been pretty good, actually. I just want to echo what you're saying there. And if anyone feels like giving us a 3-star review, don't. Just and either lie or reach out directly, and we'll answer your questions. But yeah, I've had a pretty good week. We're kind of in the middle of planning a bit of a European road trip at the moment, and we're going to take the motorhome off for about 3 weeks, and we're going to. So who knows? Might jump on a pod from wherever we happen to be, if there's decent coverage on the old internet out there. But we're we're going to head
immediately
off
picturing a Chevy Chase European vacation in the station wagon, dragging a dead dog in the background.
Exactly that. I'm not sure if this is necessarily the platform to recite some of the lines from that movie, but yeah, exactly that. And that was exactly what a good mate of mine kind of posted as soon as I told him that I couldn't make a specific event because we were going away. He sent me the front cover on my WhatsApp of National Lampoon's European Vacation.
The kids, Big Ben, Parliament.
Yeah. Hopefully, I mean, most people, maybe, I don't, who knows? We haven't got our full demographic, but most people on this pod may or may not have heard of that. If not, go away, Google it. It's great.
Well, for anyone who's not seen it, you probably have seen Christmas Vacation, because that's on every Christmas. And it is my number one favourite Christmas movie, by the way, bar none. But if anyone's not seen European Vacation or National Lampoon's Vacation, they are absolute gold. Chevy Chase at his finest.
Absolutely.
That's you, mate.
Sorry?
That's going to be you, mate.
That's going to be us. That is going to be us. So, yeah. What about you? How's your week been?
Well, so this week, big week. This week, I turned 50.
Welcome to the club, my friend.
Thank you very much. Do you know what? When we were chatting last time, and I'm not blowing smoke up your ass here, I thought you were younger than me, but it turns out you're older than me.
I am. It's I think that day maybe I'd shaved and maybe got rid of a little bit of the wispy whiteness off the tip of my beard. Because I think when I've had a shave, it maybe drops a year or two. But you know, my kids are starting to tell me I'm looking more and more like Santa Claus every day. And
mate, seriously, if I let mine go, I grew my beard over Christmas, over COVID, and yeah, it was exactly like that, like proper badger with like large streaks of kind of white hair. So yeah, I hear you there.
But anyway, thanks for tuning into the beard discussion podcast.
Beard of the Week Club.
Yeah, exactly. So, well, turning 50, welcome to the club. So what does that lead into? What do you want to discuss this week?
Well, I thought we touched upon it in was it last episode? I'm not sure. One of the other episodes, we were talking about, when's the right time to take a break. And I've just been, reflecting a lot the last month or so on turning 50. And I actually think that I'm happier now than I've ever been. I've had a pretty good life, good 20s, good 30s, love my 40s, but I feel happier and healthier now and more motivated than I ever have. And you know what I'm going to say? I'm pretty sure that's come about since I quit the booze. I found coaching. I found so many more things in my life that light me up. Much as I enjoyed my 30s and 40s, it didn't really kind of felt like I'd found my purpose, felt a little bit directionless. I was just doing what everybody else did. But the last few years have just been amazing. Once you kind of get that spark and you find that passion in life, and honestly, for me, it's the alcohol-free space. It's, obviously stopping drinking has led into joining sort of the alcohol-free community, but it's just been brilliant and it's become a passion. It's something that it's just, lights me up every day. Yeah, I'm super excited about it. Love working with people to help them change their relationship with alcohol and watch the impact that it has on them. and the people around them. I think that's one of the things that you learn about going alcohol free. It's not just about you at all. It's about the ripple effect that it has on other people. It might be, your wife, your kids, people you work with, your grandkids. It just, if you're a leader in a business, for example, you people report into you. Perhaps if they're younger than you, they tend to follow your lead. They look up to you as a leader, so you can really influence other people. And I don't have kids, but I know you do. But I'm sure setting that example and being a role model as a father is a huge deal, right?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's the number one thing for me. I mean, I gave up at the age of 48, and I mean, I just now 4 years in, I'm so much happier to hopefully, there's no definites in this world. We all know that, but I want to give myself the best opportunity to be around for my kids as long as I can be,
Mhm.
because I was 42 years of age when I had 41 actually when we had our first son. So, you know, I'm an older dad. But
Yeah.
like you, for me, I always looked after my fitness.
See,
Um,
I didn't do that at all until I stopped drinking. I didn't do any exercise.
right. But I mean, for me, it was never, I never went at it 100%. But I gave up at 48. When 49 came round, I had this knowledge that I was going to have my 50-year-old health check at the doctor. And
You know what that involves. We get to 50, don't you?
well,
We won't go into that on here.
it doesn't
Yeah,
involve that
I've
anymore.
been dreading that for
I'm not,
years.
it doesn't involve that anymore.
The
It's got
old
to come
rubber
with blood
glove.
test. That's not why I was looking forward to it either. But it, it's
Oh, I have one
um
every month.
exactly. You can't be too careful, can you?
You again.
So
You're not due yet. You only saw you 2 weeks ago. Go away.
exactly. Oh dear, you carry on like that. We're gonna have to start all over again. So yeah, I was looking forward to that opportunity to go. I wanted to. There was that smug part of me, right, that wanted to go into that room. And when he turns around, or she turns around and says, "So, how many units of alcohol do you drink a week, Mister Smith?" And that sense of that real quiet win and that real I was so looking forward to that moment. And when I turned around and said, "Oh, I'm done," actually, she didn't say a word. They just carried on as normal. I was like expecting fanfares and everything else. But the lovely thing was that check came back clear and came back. My liver function was better. My blood pressure was down. My cholesterol was better than it had ever been. My resting heart rate had dropped. I know I'd lost probably 7 or 8 kilos before I went in because I'd had a couple of years alcohol free. So the benefits have been huge. But equally, I might not have gone if I'd been drinking. I might have pushed it back. I might have found more important things to do than actually bother to turn up for that check because it's not compulsory, right? I actually phoned. Knew I was probably due it, but I didn't know how it worked. I'd never been 50 before, so I phoned my GP and I said, "Look, I've just turned 50 and I'd like to come along and have a health check." So there's the other flip side that had anything been wrong, I possibly would have picked it up nice and early. So there's that side of it. But yeah, like yourself, I mean, I decided to make this break later in life. I was 48 years of age. I now, 4 years on, look back and think my only regret is that I didn't do it sooner.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, actually. And I think a lot about that. Had I known 20 years ago what I know now, would I have decided to go on alcohol free from the outset, like not drink at all? What's your view on that?
Yeah, that's a difficult one because that's looking back at it from being alcohol free. Do I wish? I have to be honest, and honesty is the best policy here. That no, at this stage, not necessarily.
I'm the same.
But so glad that I have. But I'm never going to take away from some of the belly laugh moments that I had as with my friends in my 20s and 30s. When I say had I done it sooner, I'm probably talking 10 years earlier rather than
Yeah,
rather
yeah,
than at the very beginning, because at the very beginning you don't know what you don't know, right? I had my first drink of alcohol at probably 15, I would say. So that you don't have that crystal ball, and had some amazing times and some great times, some great laughs, but I guess it leads into that, when you do make that decision, is there ever a perfect time to make that stop, because something is always going to be there, right? If you put it off because of the next stag do, wedding, and at 52, there's not many stag do's and weddings going on for me anymore, but you never know. But stag do's, weddings, and
Funerals.
Christmases, funerals, birthday party, all those things. They happen
Second
every year,
weddings.
right? Yeah, exactly. They happen every year. So making that decision to stop, kind of, I always think it should be, if you make that choice, then the time is now, really.
I think you start to know as well. You start to get an itch.
Yeah.
That's definitely what happened with me. I started to get an itch around my late 30s, and I wasn't quite sure. I remember I sort of said before that I was looking for a book to read on holiday, and I read How to Control Alcohol by Alan Carr. And I was particularly drawn to it because it was control. So I definitely knew there was something going on for sure. Just wanted to circle back a minute. Oh, circle back. I hate that term. Do you want to go back to something you said a moment ago there about not wanting to, glad that you drank, when you're younger, but would have started a little bit earlier, because I completely resonate with that, because it's something that I've thought a lot about as well. And I'm definitely glad that I did drink. I probably would have maybe stopped when I was about in my mid 30s, but alcohol performs almost a different function for us when we're a lot younger than it does when we're older. I think it does give us that sort of social acceptance to be part of the group when when you are in your 20s. And you're right, it does to an extent help you fit in. So it generally does perform a function and a benefit, I think, for people. I think it's a little bit different now because, as we know, nearly 40% of under 25-year-olds don't drink. So there isn't necessarily that need for them to, to fit in with what everybody else is doing, because a lot of younger people don't do it anyway. So I'm not suggesting for a second that people in their 20s should go out and drink just because they need to do it to fit in, because it's a different landscape now to what it was, in the 90s when we were doing it. But I think the older you get, I mean, first of all, your body finds it more difficult to process alcohol the older you get. And I remember I had a health checkup when I think I actually was 38, and I kind of was a bit worried about some of the things that I put in my body when I was in my 20s. We've all kind of been there. I won't go into details, but I did a bit of hell raising in the 90s, spent a lot of time in nightclubs, that kind of thing. And I was a bit worried about, had I done permanent damage? And I said to the doctor, I got all these health tech checks done, and I was completely upfront about what I'd done when I was younger. And he said to me, Mr. Lloyd, there's something we don't generally tell patients, but I'll tell you now. And he said, you can pretty much get away with anything until you get to your early 30s, and your body will repair and regenerate. Within reason, the body will heal. So you haven't done any permanent damage. You're absolutely fine. But if you carry on doing that much past your mid 30s, that's when your body will not repair itself. You will do permanent damage. So yes, okay, you've done these things, but you're fine. So I looked at that as like, brilliant. So literally I did that on a free pass. I had a fantastic time, had some great experiences. But the message was, if you carry on doing it, I wasn't doing it at that point anyway, it stopped. But apart from the drinking, but that was a real message. He was like, now is the time to, change your lifestyle. And I've never forgotten that. But it kind of, in a way, it makes me look back on my 20s and think I'm so glad that I did do those things, because that's, for me at the time, that's part of growing up. Drinking was so much more prevalent then than it was now. But I think the message I guess I want to get across to people as part of this extremely long ramble is that, if you're in your 40s and your 50s and you're still drinking and you've got that itch, you're waking up in the morning thinking, I'm really not sure I should still be doing this, something doesn't feel right, then there is still time. There's still tons of time to do something about it before, you're making it worse. And that's exactly what we did, right? I was in my late 40s, you were 48.
Yeah, it's exactly that. It did become that little voice. There were, I'm not sure how for you, but there were a couple of moments in my kind of later drinking career that really kind of, not rock bottoms, but kind of like moments of clarity where I thought, you know what, this isn't really stacking up for me. But also, it wasn't necessarily always just the hangovers or the sluggishness. It was kind of almost like the cumulative cost of it. It was almost like I just feel like there's this haze, and there's always that question in my mind, like, God, when was the last time I actually took a decent day off the booze? Like, and when was the last time when I had
You
a
were hungover.
solid week off, or I wasn't hungover, or I wasn't not even necessarily massively hungover, just that sluggishness and that horrible feeling. So yeah, I think like you say, it's when you start asking that question of yourself. If it becomes a question you're asking, then subtly I knew it was time to start taking action. Did that mean I took action straight away? No, I talked on a previous podcast about the fact that probably the single biggest tipping point for me was about a year and a half after I'd become a dad, and I fell asleep on a train after a meeting in London. I think I talked about this before. I woke up sort of 70 miles from home, last train, and I had to get a really embarrassing taxi ride home. I felt like shit, and I basically woke up the next morning thinking, you need to put an end to this. But I didn't. I just carried on, and it carried on for a good few years after that before I really made that kind of break that finally stuck. So I guess through that period of time, there was always that moment of, is this really serving me? And I knew it wasn't, right? I knew it wasn't, but I just carried on because it was the done thing and it's what everybody else did. And I think I was probably scared. Well, not scared, maybe just locked in. And I didn't really have that
Don't know how.
moment. Yeah, I didn't know how.
Don't know how. You know how
I
to go.
didn't know how.
That's
That
that's.
hits it on the head, actually. That's exactly the point. I didn't know how.
Mm.
Because I thought I knew how. I thought that you have this picture of a landscape of, you actually, oh gosh, if I say now that I want to stop drinking, am I admitting to people that I've got a severe problem? Am I admitting to people this? And I don't think I did, but I didn't know how to come forward and say, right, I'm actually going to take a break now without having all eyes cast on you, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I know what you mean. Sometimes at rock bottom is almost better because it forces people, okay, things have to change. But where you're just having like these mini rock bottoms that, you know, aren't bad enough to kind of force you to make an immediate change, it just goes on and on and on and on. And I remember probably in the last couple of years when I was still drinking, I was just constantly waking up on a Sunday morning in the spare room where I'd had an argument with Chris
Mhm.
because I'd acted like a dick on a Saturday night, where we'd been out somewhere and I'd just had too much to drink and I just acted like an idiot again. And every single time, when you go to bed on the Saturday night feeling completely self-righteous that, I'm in the right, I'm not going to back down on this. Yeah, you're wrong. No, no. And you wake up the Sunday morning and you're just like, oh, Christ,
Yeah,
doing this, and that was one of the big things for me was just like, I can't keep treating my wife it wasn't like abusive or anything like that, but I was just like we were always like getting into arguments just because I was being petulant and just being a dick and being
mm,
obnoxious and annoying. So, but I never saw that at the time. When you've had a few drinks, you're just like, I'm always
yeah,
right, and that was just happening over and over again. And I definitely had this sense that you cannot keep treating her like that. It's not right. It's not fair. And one day you're going to wake up on your own for good. So that was really starting to concern me every time it happened, and it was happening more and more.
yeah. Mine was similar, but mine was more, even the more subtle effects. Well, I say subtle when I tell you what it was. It's not subtle, but it wasn't necessarily the arguing or the well or the being obnoxious or anything like that. I had a massive issue with snoring when I drank.
Did you?
And the reasons I woke up one morning to being played a voice note from
Oh
my wife's
no!
phone.
Oh no! How embarrassing! Shit.
And I genuinely thought she was playing the soundtrack of a Harley Davidson starting up. It was really, the sole reason for that was because I wasn't falling asleep. I was going into a state
Awesome.
of passing out and, tongue dropping back in
Nation.
your head right back, literally. And I 90% of that has gone,
Yeah.
and that's probably through the weight loss. I lost 8 kilos when I stopped drinking.
Did you?
And it's probably due to that mostly because I'm only 5'7", so 8 kilos shows a lot on me. So that dropped off, and with that, I picked up my sporting endeavors kind of catapulted forward for me. So I got fitter, I got healthier, and I moved on with all of that, and that became my new focus. So the snoring pretty much stopped within about a month of me stopping drinking.
It's interesting you talk about that actually, and you mentioned it a little bit earlier on. When we talked, briefly about the impact that going alcohol free has on the people around you, and your family and your kids and people like that. One of the things that Chris has kind of done it, with me. To be honest, she's had to endure me banging on about how great being alcohol free is, but she wasn't a huge drinker to begin with. But she's kind of come along for the ride, and now is very much an advocate for it as well. She still drinks occasionally, maybe like once every couple of months if she's out with the girls or something, and she feels like a glass of wine. But she doesn't really drink, and we've kind of come to the conclusion that we're both the same age, both turning 50 this year, and we're looking at how the rest of our lives are going to pan out, and I kind of sort of think that you have a responsibility to your partner, and definitely your kids. Obviously, we don't have kids, but you do. You have a responsibility to look after yourself so you can look after them. Because I want to be around for her for another 40 or 50 years, and I want her to be around for the same amount of time to look after me. There's nothing, I think it's really unfair to be in a situation where one person's looking after themselves and living a healthy lifestyle, and the other person's, just doing the complete opposite. Because what you're basically saying is, well, in 10 years and 15 years, I'm going to need you to look after me. And that's not fair to burden somebody with that. You have a responsibility, I think, to your partner to look after them in later life. And part of doing that is keeping yourself healthy.
You're absolutely right. And coming at it from the angle of being a dad, I mean, I've really noticed in the last 6 months or so, my boys, I've got 2 boys now. I've got Jack is 11 and Tom is 9. Both just had their birthdays recently. Both of them are really inquisitive now about being alcohol free. They both listen to the podcast. Jack even wants to come on and be interviewed on that. And I thought that might be really interesting. Get him on for 10 minutes and ask what they think about it. We'll maybe further down the line, but they totally see what's going on. And I'm definitely not going to be that dad that tells them they can't drink. Because how could I be? But I genuinely feel I'm being a bit of a lighthouse for them. They're telling me, I mean, like I say, they're 9 and 11, and both of them tell me, I'm never going to drink. I'm never going to drink. And whether that's the case, I genuinely don't know. And I won't be upset if they decide to, but I believe they get a clearer indication and they know the truth now. But, something I mentioned on a different podcast where I was on the OTI podcast, on Father's Day just gone, my youngest made me a Father's Day card, and he drew a can of Lucky Saint, but he changed the wording to Lucky Daddy. And he wrote down the side an AFD, which is athletics club I've just introduced him to because he's getting into his running now too. And where it said AFD, which is Aldershot Farnham District Athletic, he wrote alcohol-free daddy. And that was just incredible because I was not expecting that at all. And to spend the time to sit down and draw that, it just shows you the impact that can have on them. And, I love going out running with him. I've just taken, with the time off I'm having at the moment, I've just taken the boys this week. We've been playing tennis, so they're active, they're out and they see what an active lifestyle is about. Of course, they want to be on their iPads and they want their screen time and all of that, but I believe I'm giving them a real balance, and so as is my wife Jo, because we're active. We're active. We get out on the bikes, we take them out. And maybe maybe we're just a little bit more active. Maybe I'm just that little bit more active now that I'm not drinking, and that side of it as well, showing them the importance of keeping fit and getting out and living your life without necessarily being glued to a TV or iPad screen. But that. Find everything in balance, so yeah, it's
that's amazing.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you told that story. I was going to tee you up to tell that story about Lucky Saint, because I remember when I was listening to your episode on OTI, and it's one of those moments where I remember where I was. I mean, it was only about a month ago, but I was walking around Frankfurt Airport listening to it whilst I was waiting for a plane, and I remember literally hearing you talk about that, and I thought, that's absolutely brilliant. That was
lovely
moment for you.
It was really lovely. So, we've talked about how we made our way to make that decision. What's changed for you? If you could kind of pinpoint now that you've made that decision, and like we've said, we both made it that little bit later in life, what stands out for you the most, really?
Well, honestly, it's been absolutely transformational. I mean, you've only known me since since we met on, training to be coaches, but I'm a completely different person to what I was 10 years ago. I'm not saying I'm better or worse. I'm just a different person, but I'm definitely a happier person. And if the whole point in life is to be happy, then for me, it's going alcohol free is what's delivered that. I was very much somebody before who, liked to be life and soul of the party and liked to go to bed late. And one thing that I've kind of noticed actually since really over maybe in the last sort of few months is I'm probably not as sociable a person as I thought I was because, now when I go out socializing, I'll stay for a couple of hours and then I'll probably go. And I'm quite happy with that. I don't feel like I'm missing out on anything. But when I was a drinker, I definitely wanted to be out all of the time, but I'm not sure that was really me. I think that it kind of turned into somebody when I was drinking that wasn't the real me, and I was like that for 30 years. And now, certainly in the last few months, I've generally started to question who actually am I, and am I that person that I thought I was? So there's been quite a big bit of self discovery, I think, but that's really come kind of, like I say, quite recently. So I'm coming off alcohol free. It's only in the last sort of 6 months I've started to question this. but in terms of how it's changed my life, how long have you got? Honestly, everything has changed, for the better. I think probably the health aspect, is clearly the biggest because, like I mentioned a moment ago, I wasn't an exerciser at all. I hated exercise. It didn't interest me. People always say, oh, do the exercise that you like or do the sport that you like because you're more likely to carry on doing it. And that's fine. I don't disagree with that. But what if you don't like any of it? Where do you start? And one of the things I think that's key with exercise, well, first of all, it's consistency. That's the most important thing with any exercise, showing up and doing it regularly. But when you're sedentary and you're not doing any exercise, the idea of getting up and doing something is like, oh no, it doesn't interest me. I can't be bothered until you start, because your brain will always tell you to conserve energy. So the idea 100 years ago of going to a gym or going on a treadmill, it's just like, what? Why would you waste calories? The body's trained to preserve energy, not waste it. But once you start, so your brain is naturally telling you, don't do that. That's stupid. Why do I do that? So subconsciously you're already sort of thinking, I don't, your brain's telling you not to exercise. But when you start doing it and you start feeling those benefits, all of a sudden it just becomes something that you just crave doing. So if you're not an exerciser and you're thinking, yeah, great that you do that, James, but it's not really for me. Once you start and you do it for a few weeks, your mindset automatically changes. Your subconscious starts telling you to do it in the same way it tells you to go to the bathroom or brush your teeth or whatever. It just becomes, once you've built that habit, which is, they say, is about 3 weeks it takes to build a habit, your mindset towards it completely changes. So that's definitely been a huge upside. And then when you look at, the kind of the 4 pillars of health, exercise, diet, sleep, mental health, all 4 of those are very closely interlinked. And alcohol undermines all 4 of those pillars of health. With exercise and diet, it's very much about consistency, and alcohol is terrible for ruining consistency, because no one wants to eat a salad when they've got a hangover. No one wants to go to the gym when they've got a hangover. But then, of course, mental health and sleep as well. And sleep, we've spoken about it briefly before, but the sleep benefits alone are just out of this world. Because when you sleep well, most nights, you just feel so much better. And whatever people's views are on sleep, and we'll do an episode on sleep for sure, alcohol is destroying your sleep. Whether you think it is or not, it is. The science is absolutely crystal clear on that. You might think, well, I sleep great when I've had a few beers. You don't. You said it a moment ago. It sedates you. It knocks you out. That is not good sleep at all. Yeah, like I said, I could go on for hours about some of the changes and the benefits, but the most important thing is there's no sense of loss. The thing where I struggled, and where most people I think struggle, is the idea that, yeah, but I like to be able to have a bit of a drink occasionally. To stop focusing on what you think you're going to lose, and focus on all of the things that you're potentially going to gain, or you are going to gain. There's no potentially about it. You are going to gain them.
Yeah.
But a bit of it is taking a leap of faith, because you don't know what you don't know. You don't know what sleep feels like when alcohol's not in the mix. If you drink a couple of 3 or 4 times a week, and you've done that for 20 or 30 years, you don't know what good sleep is. categorically.
No.
You just don't know. So you have to
Yeah.
keep your faith that it's going to be better. What's
Yeah.
make big changes for you?
I mean, yeah, glorious sleep. That was, certainly 2 to 3 weeks in. That's what kind of really hit me. But I yeah, my journey's slightly different. I said to you before, I was into my fitness. I've always been a keen runner. I alluded to that on a couple of other podcasts as well. But I was almost using that as a reason to tell myself that I didn't really have a problem. But I've discovered a love for that bigger than I knew I had. I since and this isn't hopefully doesn't come across as self-indulgent because I don't want it to, but I just kind of want to cover what can open for you, and it doesn't have to. It can be in any avenue whatsoever. But since I stopped drinking, I got mostly firstly into my triathlon. I love my triathlon, so I've now in the 4 years since I've given up, I've now completed 4 full distance Ironman. I've done 2 half distance Ironman. I've got another one in a month's time. I got into my ultra running, but the reason behind the ultra running was really I'd taught myself through giving up drinking that I could do difficult things. So
Yeah.
that helped me as much as the training, as did the consistency in being able to show up and do it. And the consistency in trying to train for a 100 or 200 mile ultra marathon whilst juggling a family life and having 2 kids. I had to be running. I'd be going out on runs with a mate of mine, and we'd start at 9:30 in the evening and run through till 6 a.m. So
Enough.
in order or be up and down the pool for 6 a.m. training for a race. So yeah, I mean, I've pushed myself in terms of my ultras to things I never ever dreamt I could even be capable of. I didn't think I could ever complete an Ironman, and now I'm kind of annoying my wife by talking about what one I want to sign up to next, or to take on the race that I did last December, which I put myself through the toughest thing I've ever done. I ran for 82 hours and slept for 6 on my own through the dark,
Wow.
through the winter, across the south of the UK. And would I rush back and do something like that again? Never say never, but that taught me things about myself that I never knew, but I would never have done it had I not gone alcohol free. It would never have crossed my path. I would never have dreamt I could have pushed myself to that much. And that's not about showing up and training and putting the exercise in and putting all the work in. It was about genuinely 80% of that was about mental strength. And the mental strength that giving up alcohol has given me has been probably the biggest gain I've ever had. And it's taught me how to deal with difficult things. And that's been a real, for me, that's the biggest thing. It can be anything. I've talked before, now occasionally I'll pick up, I remember that I used to be all right at art at school as well, so now I'll sit with the kids and I'll draw birthday cards with them. I'm not selling any masterpieces, but I just found you find things that you forgot you loved, even if it goes back to school. I always said I could never play the guitar because my hands were too small, and I still can't play the guitar, but I can play the guitar better than I ever could. And I'm learning that with my kids. So there's it opens up these wonderful things that don't have to be about taking on massive tasks. It can be whatever you want it to be. You might find that you want to get back into dancing or theatre or knitting or whatever it happens to be, and that's what I love about it. It's just opened up those doors.
I think that mental strength is a big thing, but it's also always related to emotional resilience as well. How much easily you can deal with what life throws at you.
Yeah.
And that goes back to the piece around sleep as well, I think. It's been well established that when you're drinking, you don't get as much rapid eye movement sleep. And we'll do a deep dive on this in a future episode, but, just kind of scratch the surface with it. During REM sleep is when our bodies kind of repair.
Restorative, yeah.
It's restorative sleep. And that's also where our brains problem solve from the previous day. So when you go to sleep and you've got stuff on your mind, you're not quite sure how to figure it out. Your brain works on that when you're asleep and gives you the
Yeah.
answer the next morning. But
Yeah.
that happens during REM sleep.
Yeah.
If you're not getting enough REM sleep because you've got alcohol in your system, you're waking up the next day and you've just got all these problems hanging around and accumulating, and they bog you down, and
Mm.
it makes you less emotionally resilient. Things stop you and slow you down and depress you that just don't when you're not drinking, because
No,
your brain just processes them when you're asleep and just like, yeah, problem solved, but next thing, on to the next. And that's a huge difference, I think.
you're so right. And I look at, I trained in January this year as an ultra marathon coach. It was something I took on as a sideline as well. But looking into that and training in the physicalities behind training physically for an event like that, the amount of research that's now going in for athletes, of just how important sleep is in the training cycle, and how much rest is so important within the training cycle. Looking at that 20 years ago, there was the whole, huge, train hard, work hard, no pain, no gain. All of that is not,
Rubbish.
all the work happens in sleep. All the good, the benefits come in the sleep. You train
Oh,
and you train to
absolutely.
follow a training program, but when you're sleeping, that's when your body's repairing. And that's when it's sapping all the goodness out of all the training that you've done to make you stronger and make you better. So the same thing can be said about just, even when you're not undertaking things like that, just that restorative sleep, and the benefits of sleep are huge. The other metrics that come through, like HRV and so on and so forth, that you would really start to look at how beneficial sleep is to you. And we're all wearing Garmin's and Whoops and everything else on our wrists now that you can track this data, you can
Oh
see
yeah,
it. And
you've got the data. You can't miss
yeah,
it.
you
You
can't
cannot
miss it.
miss it.
You can't miss
It's
it. A good friend of mine, he doesn't drink a great deal, but he tells me, and I train with him a lot, and he tells me if he's had a couple of beers the night before, his HRV drops through the floor.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah.
Mm,
That's what they're so fantastic, because you can't ignore the data. When,
mm,
and even if you're drinking really rarely, the effects on your sleep can last, somewhere between 3 to 5 days.
yeah.
Not just it literally can trash your entire week. One night of having 2 or 3 glasses of wine with dinner can almost trash your sleep for the best part of a week.
Mm,
And I remember I read a book, many people might have heard of it. It's called Why We Sleep by Professor Matthew Walker. And it's generally seen as being kind of the Bible of sleep. And I read this a few years ago, and it's an incredible book, and it changes the way you think about sleep, and it makes you prioritize sleep, almost above, it puts sleep above basically diet and exercise as like the number one most important pillar. And one of the things that he says in that book is that, if you want any evidence of just how critically important sleep is, look at evolution. We sleep for 1/3 of our lives.
mhm,
What does that tell you about how important, and not just important, but how the benefits that we're getting from it? Because if we were, when we are hunter gatherers, and as we've evolved, the idea of spending 1/3 of your time with your eyes closed, where you can't protect your family, you can't hunt for food, you're vulnerable to predators. Evolution would have phased out sleep, or at best reduced the amount of time we spend doing it, unless it was giving us some absolutely incredible benefit. And all animals sleep in some capacity or another. So you're completely right when you sort of talk about this idea of, train hard and, sleep's secondary importance. It's not. Sleep is the most important thing for our health. I mean, I'm not a doctor, but I'm going to go out there and say that I think sleep is the most important thing for our health.
mhm,
And
mm,
if you're just having a couple of glasses of wine or a beer after work 3 or 4 times a week, you are chronically underslept. You might not think you are, because that's your benchmark and that's what you know. But when you take
mm,
a break and you have a period where you're not drinking, the difference that you see with sleep is absolutely undescribable.
mm. And you're more likely, when you're in that situation, to be saying those kind of comments like, you know what, I'll sleep when I'm dead. And,
Yeah,
like,
that was absolutely.
it's that kind of, yeah,
Yeah, sleep is for wimps,
sleep for
right?
wuss. Yeah, I'm going to sleep when I'm dead. It's like, I love that quote by James Corden when he talks about how alcohol kind of borrows time from tomorrow.
Oh, it's
It's
brilliant.
almost like using a credit card. So when you're drinking, you're making that decision, just how much time from tomorrow do I want to withdraw? And if I'm going to stay till 3 a.m., am I really borrowing half a day off tomorrow to have it today? And it's so true. I love it as a quote. So yeah, it's, it's a conversation I think we could chat about forever. And I love it. I find it fascinating. I think, we've kind of gone off on different tangents and different things through this conversation. But ultimately, I hope that in having these conversations or having this conversation today, and I've really enjoyed talking about this, it does make people think that, don't not to have that feeling, what, maybe I'm just a bit long and I've been drinking for 30 years and actually maybe the damage is done and maybe I should just carry on and maybe I should moderate or drop it down or whatever, or maybe ignore that voice that's in your head and keep pushing on and think, what, I've done it this long, what's the point? And hopefully we can kind of clear that a little bit for people, I hope, in having this conversation today.
Let me ask you for one more question. Yeah, we've spoken recently about changing. So the NHS 10-year strategy that's coming out, which is going to include labeling on bottles. I've thought for a while that alcohol is basically 15 years behind cigarettes in terms of public awareness and perception. In terms of people coming into changing their relationship with alcohol quite late in life, what do you think the landscape's going to look like in 10 years in terms of people's attitude towards alcohol based on the trajectory that we're on at the moment?
I would agree with you. And having kind of worked in hospitality through the smoking ban and seeing the impact that had on the number of people, and, people are smoking far less, vaping's a different story, but, genuinely smoking has dropped off. And I think it's been a positive thing, for whatever reason, the cost has gone through the roof. And, but I can see alcohol following suit. Like you say, next year, Ireland introduce labels onto bottles. I believe there's countries in the world that already do it.
South Korea, they have cancer warnings on their bottles.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's, we have drink aware stamped on it, and that's putting the ownership on you as a drinker. Where actually I think I'm not, and I've said this throughout, I'm not anti-drinking, but I am anti-giving knowledge. And I do think people should know, I grew up around cigarettes. I was never a smoker. Of course, I tried it as a kid. I'm sure we all had that cheeky puff of a cigarette behind the bike shed, but I never was a smoker. And I grew up knowing it was really rammed down my throat that smoking was dangerous for you. And it was seen on labels, and it's seen on labels a lot more now. It wasn't as much, of course. You'd have, is it James Hunt flying around the racetrack with JPS all over his F1 car, and it would be widely advertised, and I get it. It's moved that way, but I would look at advertising in sport through alcohol now as well is getting better. But it's all 0%. Of course, they're still getting the brand name out there, and I'm kind of on the fence with that. But equally, I think, alcohol-free beer is sponsoring a lot of sport. People are waking up to alcohol-free alternatives through that, which can only be a good thing. And I think the knowledge is going there. So in terms of where we're going to be in 10, 15 years, I think we've got a clear indication of where it's going by what's going on with the younger generation today. There's probably a whole other debate, why, but I think on the most part, the younger generation certainly look after their health and their well-being a lot more than we did. So I think I can see it's moving in the right direction. How it's going to go, only time will tell. But
well, I guess the question I'd ask people to ask themselves is, if you're in your 40s and your 50s and you're like, yeah, alcohol's fine because everyone's doing it. Once this labeling comes in and you can see it on a beer bottle in the same way you can on a packet of cigarettes, are you then going to start and question, because I'd imagine a reason a lot of people don't smoke anymore. I think it's only about 10% people smoke, or even less than that. I don't know the exact numbers, but I imagine a lot of people don't smoke because for health reasons. But as you said, education and awareness is just not on the same level with alcohol. But alcohol and cigarettes are effectively, in terms of the impact on many aspects of your health, they are in the same bracket. According to, the World Health Organization, they are both class 1 carcinogens. But everyone knows that about cigarettes, and only 9% of people know that about alcohol, according to Alcohol Change UK. So the awareness piece is enormous. I mean, how many people can say, well, I didn't know that cigarettes cause cancer? Virtually nobody. 9% of people know that about alcohol, but it's been long established.
I didn't know till I gave up.
I didn't know until about 6 months ago.
Yeah.
Seriously. I didn't know until 6 months ago. it's crazy that, the way that that is kept from people, and that's been known since 1988. It's been
Mm,
classed as a class one carcinogen since 1988.
yeah,
1988.
yeah,
But there's so little knowledge and awareness of this. And if people were thinking, really, is that true? Go and look on the World Health Organization website for yourself.
yeah,
But ask yourself, how am I going to feel about that when it appears on my beer bottle or on my bottle of wine?
yeah,
Are my attitudes going to change? And if they are going to change, then why don't you do something about it now?
yeah, yeah. Great point. Great point. And a great point to probably just about wrap things up. I could chat
Yeah.
away for a lot longer, but maybe we will once we've stopped the recording. But I'm sure I've really enjoyed today's chat.
Yeah,
It's
me
been
too.
great to catch up, and a massive congratulations on turning 50. Hopefully, I've given you
Thank you, my
some
friend.
insight into the fact that it's not all that bad.
It's
What's not
brilliant.
to love, eh?
That's good. I'm delighted to be 50. I couldn't be happier.
Amazing,
Steve,
amazing.
where can people find out more about you?
Okay, so you can find me on Instagram at sober.illiant, sober.illiant, or you can check out my website, www.soberilliant.com. And yourself?
Yeah, so I'm James Lloyd, and I post on LinkedIn every day if you want sober tips and inspiration and motivation and all sorts of alcohol-free stuff. You can follow me on LinkedIn. I've also got a website, which is alcoholfreecoach.com, all one word. Hit us up, send us a message, tell us what you think about the show, tell us what you want to hear more about. Book a call just to chat with us about your aspirations, anything to do with alcohol, anything to do with life. We'd love to hear from you. We're super social guys. And yeah, thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next week.
See you next week.
See you later. Bye bye.
See you later. Bye bye.